Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
July, as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that on the phone, online, or on social media. The Alaska Weather Information Line is always available at 800-472-0391. Find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska. And of course, if you switch that out with Anchorage or Fairbanks or Juneau, you'll get your new websites that you've probably seen by now. If you have trouble finding the information on those new website formats, let me know, and you can contact any one of us on the TV team at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We love to get your emails. We love to get your comments and concerns, and suggestions for the new website, of course, are well received, and we'll work to make that better. And we have been all week, so if you haven't found some of the new things we've been fixing for you because of your suggestions, especially for low bandwidth customers in the bush and folks that are heading out to sea and especially looking forward to the fall and winter weather in the Bering and along the chain, we made some changes for you. So if you still can't find some of those low bandwidth and faster loading options, let me know and I'll point you in the right direction. There's a lot more on social media and Twitter as well. And we've been talking about not only some of the fire danger there and the danger for lightning conditions across some of the interior if you're going out and doing some fishing there, but we've also been talking about the sea ice, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. In the meantime, the extreme fire danger has blossomed over the last couple days thanks to pretty warm temperatures there. Most areas have been looking at mid to upper 80s in the interior, all the way from the middle Tanana Valley northward to even Prudhoe Bay. Dead Horse, seeing 85 degrees as a record high temperature, an all-time record high for that matter, in Prudhoe Bay earlier this week. So it's no surprise that things have dried out very quickly, as they always do, and most areas in the interior generally don't see a great deal of rainfall. With easterly waves moving through out of Canada, we've seen a copious amount of lightning in the last 24 to 48 hours, and there's more happening right now. So first of all, remember your lightning safety rules. Stay inside and in shelter for at least 30 minutes after the last sound of thunder or sighting of lightning. That usually means the storm has passed into a safe distance, which really lightning can strike 10 to 12 miles away from that thunderstorm. So a long way and a long reach over the horizon can still get you after that storm has passed. Most of these systems are very slow moving and will be drifting around, so that 30 minutes could turn into 60 or 90, so plan accordingly. But the other thing, of course, is the lightning that brings the fire danger to these already dry and tinderbox conditions across Alaska. And with that, we did see new fires start yesterday, and we'll probably see some new ones start tonight. Here's a look at the satellite picture. And first, check on dry conditions there in southeast. A beautiful day once again with temperatures back in the 60s and an awful lot of sunshine for an awful lot of folks in the Panhandle. That dry weather is still sitting in chunks and bits and pieces across the eastern Gulf all the way into south central, Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, and at times into Shelikof Strait. There's a few more clouds in that region. But as you get out toward the west, we start to get into more of an influence of low pressure sitting here across the western Gulf, and you can see that fairly clearly in the circulation as that's backing up into parts of the southern Bering Sea. This wave of weather is working northward, but high pressure right now is really still in control of the Bering, and low clouds and fog are found there. But a new weather maker has moved into the northwest coast, and you can see a little bit of that sneaking into the visible satellite picture before it cuts off in the scan. So let's turn our attention to the infrared picture, and I think you can find that a little bit better here. This elongated area of bright white color is that next long wave. That wave of weather working into the northwest coast has been pressing into the Chukchi Sea coast all afternoon long. And along that, of course, we've seen some much cooler weather behind it. And with the cloud cover, it's making a big impact in temperatures in Barrow today. In fact, late afternoon ratings were already down into the 30s. So ahead of that, we've got the warm before the storm. Behind that, much cooler northwesterly winds. And as you well know from Wainwright to Barrow, that is moving the ice a lot closer to the coast. And we did see pictures there of brash ice moving onto the coast around Barrow earlier today. And that, of course, just a sign of what could be possible further down the coast. We were looking at the town site there in Barrow. So that's what we've been talking about for a good part of the week, was watching the potential for some of that ice to come ashore. It doesn't look like a large ice shove, and certainly would have been a lot different had there been a large connected ice sheet capable of staying together and moving in. Instead, this is brash ice, and thankfully generally moderate to low concentrations of ice there. But offshore, that much larger pack or higher concentration ice is still kind of lurking fairly close to the coast. And there is another wave of northwesterly winds working in behind this. So still some potential there. On the infrared satellite picture, the other really bright white section here to point out is this region here all the way from British Columbia into the interior. That is thunderstorm activity. And with that, again, going tonight, we'll be watching that lightning danger and that fire potential that goes right along with it. Here's a look at the surface chart. An awful lot going on here, but the green are the areas of showers and storms that developed this afternoon, some of which have been going on really overnight. A look to the north and west shows that frontal position that's worked past Barrow, working toward Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, and along that areas of light rain and drizzle. Right behind it is high pressure at 1,028 millibars, pushing that colder westerly and northwesterly wind into the northern coastline. Low pressure is sitting west of St. Lawrence Island at 1,023 millibars, but it is slowing down, and that boundary is going to break apart in the next 24 hours thanks to this region here staying intact and not wanting to move. So that's still there. We still have our instability across the interior. We still have our dry air across southeast, and all of this is wrapping around high pressure here in the Gulf. So an awful lot going on, but never forget, Alaska is a big place and can certainly handle it all. Tonight's weather takes that low pressure wave from the northwest and drops it into the interior. You'll see that hovering around Fort Yukon, about 1,017 millibars if you want to mark that on the map. Out ahead of it, showers and thunderstorms will likely continue, and some of those could still be going on in isolated cases west of the Middle Tanana Valley and into some of the Middle Yukon Valley regions. High pressure will be close to the Bering Strait, about 1,027 millibars, and areas of light rain and drizzle should be found along that. It's going to be what we call a dirty ridge. It hasn't really cleaned the sky out of any moisture, so there's still going to be areas of showers and drizzle underneath that. Back to the west, a cold front, the second of two, will be working toward the northwest coast as early as tonight. And down across the western Gulf and the North Pacific, a 1,010 millibar low working northward with an occlusion on the western side of this ridge that could allow some drizzle right along the outer coast of southeast and maybe up around Haines and Skagway. Most of that, though, will be confined to the outer coast, it looks like. As we get into Saturday, dry conditions for the northern Gulf as well as Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, Prince William Sound. Looks like a pretty good Chamber of Commerce kind of day. Areas of low clouds and drizzle may linger across the coast, but most of southeast looks to be pretty dry for tomorrow. Low pressures south and west of Sand Point and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor will gradually drag a front right across the eastern chain in the Alaska Peninsula. Of course, expect periods of low visibility, rain and drizzle with that, but it won't go very far and should start to weaken even more fairly quickly as high pressure sitting right across the YK Delta at 1,027 millibars. That does mean an opportunity for some fog for you, especially along the coast and into Norton Sound. Pockets of drizzle and light rain across the northern Bering. And then our first wave of low pressure will pretty much stall as it moves into the interior. Out ahead of that, once again, showers and thunderstorms throughout the day. To the north and west, the second of two cold fronts working toward the Chukchi coast will slow down and bring in another dose of northwesterly winds as we get into Sunday, as that makes it ashore. So that'll set up across the northern slope. And now remember, conditions will already be cool, so it's not just plowing through this really mild or even hot weather that we have across the north slope. So this next wave probably won't be quite as strong and may take a little more effort to get up and over the Brooks Range. That means it's a slower transition, and that means any warm and wet air that's still lingering across this or happens to move in ahead of it could also be slow moving. And slow moving transitions tend to produce more precipitation. So there's the opportunity there around the Seward Peninsula as well as Ambler and Bettles and areas along the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, especially for the central and western areas. You might pick up a little more rain, and right now forecasts are holding around about 1/4 of an inch or so during that Sunday time frame. So there is a potential that it's going to be kind of a soaker there in some cases for Sunday, which is good news for fires, bad news if you need to be out working on the fish. As you look out across the central and eastern interior, pockets of light rain will be possible. Southwest is looking pretty dry. Showers and drizzle out across the Alaska range, the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern chain, and the western Bering, with high pressure still in control of the Gulf, and southeast still looking predominantly dry, but there will be a better chance for some showers across some of the higher terrain. As we've seen in the last couple weeks, at times, if the flow is just right, a few of those thunderstorms can work their way down toward Haines and Skagway or threaten Juneau with thunder and lightning. So be on your guard for that, and always watchful, and always watch the National Weather Service out of Juneau when the weather situation looks like that. Now, as we're looking at temperatures this afternoon, the 4 o'clock hour, mid-60s for many in southeast. A beautiful day in Juneau at 64, 63 in Sitka. Ketchikan and Annette made it into the lower 60s as well. Hyder 70 degrees, 70 in Valdez, lower to mid-60s for many in the Kenai Peninsula. 61 and cooler today in Kenai. Only in the upper 60s around Anchorage. 73 for Talkeetna, 74 in Fairbanks, 65 in Eagle. A cooler day for Northway as well. A little bit of rain in the last 24 hours. 82 in Fort Yukon, and as you look further north, you can certainly see the changes in the cold front, that leading edge of the next air mass dropping southward. Right about here, you can see the change from Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse all the way down to Atkasuk and points northward toward Barrow at 36 to Wainwright at 45. And into the Kotzebue Sound we go. Kivalina, Kotzebue, and Shishmaref all noticeably cooler today. 52 in Nome, 45 in St. Lawrence Island, 67 around Amonic, and southward we go into McGrath. It was 79 in the interior out toward the coast. You saw temperatures in the lower to mid-60s. St. Paul and St. George just shy of 60 at the 4 o'clock hour. Sandpoint was 54. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska about 57, and lower to mid-50s for Shemya, Adak, and Atka. As you look at overnight lows, expect the interior to remain mild, especially around Fort Yukon at 63. Southeast, we expect to see temperatures in the upper 50s for the most part. For Prince William Sound, expect overnight lows in the mid-50s. Same goes for Kodiak Island and southwestern Alaska, and the chain will be a little bit cooler. Nome's 45 tonight, about 34 in Barrow, and high temperatures there tomorrow, back in the 50s. Would you believe there's an opportunity for some rain and snow along the coast as we get into early next week? So we're not talking about winter just yet, but we are talking about some cool air lurking very close to the North Slope. In the interior, mid to upper 70s for the most part tomorrow. South Central will start the weekend in the lower to mid 60s. Southeast, expect highs in the upper 60s. Some cases up north around Haines and Skagway and Juneau could see some milder weather in the 70s. Close to 70 in Kodiak, 50s and 60s for the peninsula. Southwest, expect highs in the low 70s. Nome's 51, Shishmaref 56. And Barrow, again, a high of 52. Flying weather, we see IFR conditions out over the Gulf. MVFR to start the day closer to the outer coast of southeast. South Central's looking pretty good. Around Norton Sound, expect MVFR conditions there, and some hitting the Capes in southwest. IFR conditions across the central chain and just offshore of the Beaufort seacoast, with improvements there noted by the afternoon. Watch for widely scattered convection across the central and eastern interior, perhaps as far south as the Copper Basin. And then as we get into the Bering, IFR through the Bering Strait, touching the western Seward Peninsula, the central and eastern chain, Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula, and southeast has seen improvements there by afternoon. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvuk Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions develop by the afternoon. We'll start out with MVFR there and for Adigan Pass in the morning. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look pretty good. We'll watch for convection a little bit further north in the Alaska range. Rainy Pass, VFR to start, and stays that way for Windy Pass as well. For Isabel Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule throughout the day. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see visual conditions, but Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR. Portage Pass looks pretty good if you're going to fly through there out toward the Sound or come over to get some Kenai fish as we get into Chilkoot and White. Expect visual flight rule there through most of your day. The freezing levels indicate that colder weather working off the Chukchi Sea and into the North Slope. You can see the levels now have dropped to 6,000 to 8,000 feet. The warm air that was across the west is shifting eastward, but levels remain high, at least 10,000 feet or higher. 12,000 foot line there across the North Pacific, and then we return to heat across the western Bering. Levels there anywhere from 12 to 14,000 feet. Icing potential has dropped just a little bit southward across the North Slope. Those levels there around 9,000 feet. Still looking at light to isolated moderate at worst, and then you'll have to climb much higher across the Copper River Basin and across the North Pacific to at or above 10,000 feet to find any additional risks further south. The jet stream has our Arctic jet stream rolling across the Chukchi Sea and into the Beaufort at 105 knots, so it is just moving quickly. No wonder the winds underneath today reached up to about 40 miles per hour around Barrow. High pressure is still in control of the western Bering, and that is coupling with the Arctic jet to move things along fairly quickly and move cold air toward the North Slope, but it drops quickly south into a trough. across the southern Bering and North Pacific, and then back into a ridge across the northern Gulf, keeping conditions fairly warm for the rest of us that are not on the North Slope. At 9,000 feet, a broad westerly flow continues into the interior. You can see wind speeds picking up there, 30 to 45 knots, even 60 knots well offshore over the Arctic Ocean. Northwesterlies continue across southeast at 15 to 20 knots. And across the southern Bering and the Aleutians, winds coming in from the east and southeast around low pressure at 25 to 30. At 3,000 feet, our ridge of high pressure still holding on to southwestern Alaska. Wind speeds a little bit lighter there west and north of Bristol Bay, but on the south side of the chain, you can see winds have really ramped up to about 50 knots there, so watch out for areas of turbulence in the same old places. Northwesterly winds light across southeast at 30 knots, and again, stronger flow for the North Slope at 30 to 50 knots there, especially off the Chukchi coast. So we're watching for turbulence there across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. A little bit of bump there south of Sitka, and outside of the Dixon entrance, we'll be watching the best chance of turbulence probably across the North Slope below 4,000 feet, some of that easily reaching into isolated moderate. That's a look at your aviation forecast and more. We'll be back with your marine forecast and a look at the sea ice in just a few minutes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Thank you for watching Hangar Flying, and thank you to Alaska Public Media for allowing us to bring you Hangar Flying. This evening, we are honored to have on our show Ms. Noreen Price, who is an aviation accident investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board here in Anchorage. Welcome to the show, Noreen, and congratulations on the new job.
Thank you for having me.
So you are new to the safety board, but you're not new to aviation. Can you tell us about how you got your start in aviation?
Certainly, it was kind of interesting. When I went to college, I didn't have the money to pay for it, so I was lucky enough to get an ROTC scholarship with the Navy. I went to RPI in upstate New York, and while I was there in the Navy, you can do all sorts of different things. And they took us on field trips so that we had exposure to ships and airplanes and submarines, and I got to do a week-long trip to Pensacola, Florida, and they put us in A4s and helicopters and let us fly, and I thought, wow, they're gonna pay me to do this? So I was hooked right from the beginning, and that's how my aviation career took off, yeah.
Oh, wow. So then you entered the Navy, and what kinds of training and what kinds of aircraft?
Well, a lot of training. The military, there's a lot of training for all the different aircraft that I flew. I had a lot. Started out primary training. We fly small single-engine trainers, T-34s, and then moved on to helicopters, and we flew T-57s, which is like a Bell 206. And from there I flew H-46s, went to San Diego, lots of training there. Simulator training, classroom training, tactical training, shipboard training, safety training. I mean, the training goes on and on and on. You're really not in the cockpit flying for about a good year when you start out. And then, you know, I flew all different aircraft from C-130s to P-3s. So for every aircraft I flew, I had approximately anywhere from 3 months to 1 year of training for each of those. So it was quite a bit. It would take a couple hours to tell you about all my training, really.
Well, did you have a favorite aircraft?
I did, yeah, absolutely. Loved flying helicopters, yeah. H-46 helicopters, they're tandem rotor helicopter with no tail rotor, so a lot of fun to fly, shipboard flying. Also did search and rescue, so the missions were, you know, very worthwhile. I flew out of the Marianas Islands in Guam and off of ships doing search and rescue and medevac missions off of some of the islands there in the Pacific. And I found that very worthwhile flying, not to mention a lot of fun. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very worthwhile. So in addition to your training in the flying that you did, you received another benefit from the military, and you had the opportunity to meet a pilot who would later become your husband.
Yeah.
This is also a safety story, so can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I was a new flight instructor down in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was an instructor under training, so I was in the back seat doing instrument flying. My husband was a seasoned flight instructor out with a student, and we were in the same area, but I was at a high altitude, and we were doing an instrument penetration, which is a high-speed maneuver down, and we were going through his working area. And we did not announce that we were going through his working area. I never saw the aircraft, but he saw it, and we almost hit each other. So when we got down on the ground, he had a couple words to say to us. I had never met him, and I thought he looked interesting. And then we went to the Oak Club that Friday, and he bought a shot for me and thanked me for not killing him almost. And it was true love. But yeah, I never saw the aircraft, but it was a close call, yes.
Wow. So that is definitely a story with a happy ending.
A story with a happy ending, for sure.
Might not have
yes.
turned out that way.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, very good. So how long have you been with NTSB?
Well, 1 month. I am new to the NTSB, so it's been great. Absolutely love it. They're a great group of people here in Anchorage.
And before you came to the NTSB, what did you do?
I worked for ConocoPhillips here in Alaska. I was a regional aviation safety and technical advisor. I worked for the Safety Assurance Group in Houston, so primarily some safety oversight with the aviation vendors here in Alaska. So I got to meet and know a lot of the operators here, which was a great experience, and provide technical advice and expertise to the business unit here in Alaska. They are experts on oil and gas. Outside of our shared services operation, you know, there's not a lot of expertise for aviation type things like helicopters and helidecks and airport operations, and everybody does a great job. But I supported the business unit and those functions.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of great experience that will definitely be beneficial in your new role.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you for chatting with us, Noreen. It's been a real pleasure, and we look forward to having you back on the show to learn more about you and what you plan on doing with the National Transportation Safety Board.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this program is sponsored by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember this weekend is Aviation Fest at the museum, and until next time, please remember to file a flight plan, and if you can, also file a pilot report. Fly safely.
Thank you very much. Here's a look at the sea ice edge, and why we've been talking about Barrow to Wainwright is this high concentration ice that's above 80% in coverage is moving from northwest to south and east. Now at this time, we don't think there's going to be a major ice shove event, but don't be surprised to see more brash ice up on the shore, and we would love to see your pictures. It helps us do a better job when we're forecasting events like this. This one could also bring some areas of coastal erosion, especially again between Wainwright and Barrow. There's a second wave coming in as we go through the weekend with another push from the north and west. So don't be surprised to see this area of less concentrated ice there painted in blue, that's under 80%, close in considerably more. You can get the latest information, including information about this weather coming at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice from the Alaska Sea Ice Program. For southeast, we're watching light winds across the inside, northwesterlies 10 to 15 south of Stevens Passage into Clarence Strait, and southerlies around the Lynn Canal 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Looking for an onshore flow about 20 knots from areas north of Cross Sound up toward Icy Cape, and a northwesterly flow south of Sitka along the outer coast of the Dixon entrance, 20 to 25 with 6-foot seas there. Winds will switch around a little bit more and diminish as we get into Sunday. Still looking at northwesterlies coming down the coast, north to northwesterlies coming down through the inside waters there, 10 to 15, 3 to maybe as low as 2-foot seas, in fact, for many around Petersburg, and seas running from 5 to 7 feet across the outside. For south central, light and variable winds inside of Prince William Sound, a south and westerly flow coming up Cook Inlet tomorrow, 3 to 4-foot seas, a little bit stronger in Shelikof Strait, and westerlies along the western Gulf, 25 to 30 with 6 to 7-foot seas there. On Sunday, a broader westerly flow still holding around 20 to 25 for the western Gulf and inside and outside of the Barren Island waters in Shelikof Strait. Light northwesterlies inside of Prince William Sound with generally small seas, and winds diminish inside of Cook Inlet and still blow from the west and southwest with 2-foot seas there on Sunday. For the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, a variable flow inside the bay with a west and southwesterly wind, or southeasterly I should say, east and southeasterly across the Pacific coast and the Bering Sea coast there, 4 to 5-foot seas at best. And then as we get into Sunday, the winds switch around to more of a south and westerly flow. Southwesterlies light at 15 inside of Bristol Bay with a 2-foot sea and 9-foot seas there south of the Alaska Peninsula, with southerlies along the Bering Sea coast, 20 knots with a 3-foot sea. For the Aleutians, look for conditions on both Saturday and Sunday to remain fairly light out across the western chain, 10 to 15 knots with a 3 to 4 foot sea. Remember, low pressure is working northward as we go through Saturday and Sunday, so the winds are going to come around a little bit more as we get into the end of the weekend. For Saturday, though, they start out around 15 to 25 knots. The strongest winds to start the weekend will be around Unalaska to Nikolsky with a 10-foot sea. Moving on to the west coast, you'll notice southerlies up the Kuskokwim Delta, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. South and westerly winds from St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew, 15 knots with a 3 to 4-foot sea. And easterlies around the Pribilofs, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Saturday. For Sunday, look for southwesterlies to remain around 20 knots with 5 to 7-foot seas south and west of St. Lawrence Island. A variable flow north of Nunivak Island, and southerlies across the Pribilofs and the Kuskokwim Delta region with 3 to 4-foot seas on a 15-knot wind. For the North Slope, look for southwesterlies to cross Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, and Point Lay, and all the way up to Point Barrow at about 15 to 30 knots. Seas on the Chukchi coast and 5 to 9-foot seas are expected there. 4-foot seas north of Kaktovik and Dead Horse on a 15-knot wind. By Sunday, again, we get that west and northwesterly push, 10 to 15 knots, a little bit cooler there once again for many on the North Slope as a result of that. 20-knot winds north of Kaktovik with a 3-foot sea, and southwesterlies already building back northward, 20 knots with a 6-foot sea outside of Kotzebue Sound. Recapping tonight's weather, northwesterlies are setting in and have been for a while around Point Barrow down to Wainwright, moving some of that brash ice around. Look for another cold front to develop and move south and east as we head through the remainder of the weekend. For the interior, widespread showers and thunderstorms will continue there. Look for generally dry weather around the Gulf Coast into southeast, where periods of drizzle could be seen along the outer coast. Another weather system's working northward across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain for Saturday and Sunday. Look for that system to be light and just kind of a nuisance type situation, while another cold front drops into the North Slope. That may slow down and could bring some heavier rainfall out around Ambler and Bettles and some parts of the north and western interior. That's a look at your weekend weather. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.